Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we are diving into what I like to call the ultimate underdog story of the English language. We're talking about those tiny, mighty words that literally hold every single sentence together. The secret glue of English grammar. Prepositions. We're going to break down exactly how they work, how they evolved, and, absolutely crucial for all of us, how you can master them to instantly elevate your writing. Let's get into it.
Now think about it for a second. We spend so much time obsessing over big, impressive vocabulary words. We want to sound smart, right? So we hunt for that perfect verb or some highly descriptive adjective. But without this very specific, largely invisible category of words, all of those big vocabulary words would just be a chaotic jumble. We need joints. We need grammatical glue to make sense of the whole shebang.
Okay, let's dive into this. At its core, a preposition is just a function word. It doesn't mean a whole lot on its own, but its job is to link a noun or a pronoun with another part of the sentence to show a relationship. It tells us the physical position of something, like being under the bed, the time something happens, like after the meeting, or the direction of an action, like walking toward the door.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, the glue of English. Second, the anatomy of a phrase. Third, complex and idiomatic prepositions. Fourth, prepositions in academia. And finally, editing preposition overload.
Section 1, the glue of English. Small words, big historical impact.
It's honestly amazing how small words like in, on, and at can cause so much trouble, especially for people learning the language. But before we get deep into the weeds, I really want to reassure you. Cambridge University Press points out that English has an unusually high number of prepositions, and non-native speakers often have to make choices that just don't even exist in their native languages. But as they say, getting them slightly wrong rarely ruins your core message. So take a breath and let's explore this with curiosity rather than fear.
You know, the way we understand these words has a surprisingly stagnant and then suddenly revolutionary history. The term first pops up in Middle English way back in 1434 by John Drury. Then in 1586, William Bullockar formally defined them in the very first English grammar book. And for centuries, the definition barely changed. But in 1784, John Hunter argued that prepositions were practically the same as conjunctions, based on how they acted. And then, boom. In 1924, a linguist named Otto Jespersen completely revolutionized the concept. He realized that prepositions are actually defined by the type of complements they take, just like verbs. He blew the doors wide open on how modern grammarians classify these little words.
Section 2. Anatomy of a phrase. Building the joints. All right, so now that we've got the history down, let's shift gears and dissect the actual structure of a prepositional phrase to see how this grammatical glue works in everyday practice. Here's your basic formula. At a bare minimum, a prepositional phrase only needs two things: the preposition itself and its object. The object is usually a noun or a pronoun, but it can even be a whole clause. Now, you can easily dress this phrase up with modifiers, like adding the or an adjective. But the core structure is always just that simple two-part joint tying your sentence together.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the exact same grammatical structure can do two completely different jobs. In one instance, in the middle acts like an adjective. It gives us specific information about the noun, the cat. And in another, with fervor, acts like an adverb, describing exactly how Harry performed the verb, drank. It's the exact same building blocks, but with entirely different architectural functions in the sentence.
Section 3. Complex and idiomatic prepositions. The chaos of English.
Now, what's really interesting about this is, well, if English were always perfectly logical, it wouldn't be English, right? Notice the sheer volume of rote memorization required for idiomatic prepositions. Why do we say accuse of a crime but charge with a crime? Why do we differ about a question but differ from a quality? There is no logical rule here. They're just idioms. For native speakers, these patterns sound right unconsciously, but for non-native speakers, it requires intense memorization.
Beyond idioms, English also loves to group words together to create complex prepositions. These are basically multi-word units that function as a single grammatical entity. They usually follow a very specific pattern: preposition plus noun plus preposition. Phrases like in accordance with or on behalf of. You can't separate these words. They work together as one, and they are essential tools for highly precise, sophisticated, and formal communication.
Moving to Section 4, Prepositions in Academia, the secret sauce of science.
So it turns out that different academic disciplines actually wield these tiny words as strategic tools to accomplish completely different goals. It's fascinating. Research into academic writing genres, specifically looking at PhD theses and research articles, reveals that hard sciences, like the medical sciences, heavily rely on prepositions for spatiotemporal sequencing. They use them to rigorously track physical space and chronological time in experiments. Soft sciences, on the other hand, like the social sciences, opt for much more varied prepositional meanings. They use them to build highly clear, nuanced, and ultimately persuasive arguments. The discipline you're in literally dictates the grammatical glue you choose.
Finally, Section 5, Editing Preposition Overload, Sleek, Active, and Rule-Breaking Writing.
Okay, so we've seen how they work and how academics use them, but what happens when you use too many? Let's talk about fixing sentences bogged down by too much grammatical glue and why some of the rules you learned in school are actually meant to be broken. I'm sure you had a teacher who told you that ending a sentence with a preposition is a cardinal sin of grammar. Well, surprise, Merriam-Webster publicly and explicitly confirmed recently that stranding a preposition at the end of a sentence is completely 100% acceptable. This supposed grammar crime is actually just a myth that people have been enforcing for centuries. No way, right?
So, the crucial point here is understanding context. Moving the preposition to the beginning is called fronting, like saying, "With whom did you go?" Now that sounds incredibly formal, maybe even a bit stiff. Leaving it at the end is called stranding. Who did you go with? This is natural, everyday English. Modern grammarians agree that both are perfectly valid. You choose the structure based on the formality of your audience, not some arbitrary, outdated rule.
Now, while you don't have to worry about stranding them, you definitely still have to worry about overusing them. Here are 3 highly actionable steps based on guidance from Grammarly. First, spot the overload. If you have more than one prepositional phrase every 10 to 15 words, your writing is probably getting clunky. Second, swap those phrases out for adverbs where you can. Instead of saying he ran with caution, just say he ran cautiously. Much better. And third, switch from the passive voice to the active voice.
Just take a look at this classic example to see what I mean. In the passive voice, why was the road crossed by the chicken? It forces us to use that prepositional phrase, by the chicken, and just makes the whole thing feel fussy and slow. By switching to the active voice, putting the chicken in the driver's seat where it belongs, we instantly ditch the unnecessary glue. Why did the chicken cross the road? It's elegant, it's economical, and it's so much easier to read.
So, we've covered the history, the anatomy, the complex variations, and how to elegantly edit these mighty little connectors. But it leaves us with a really fascinating thought to end on. If generation after generation believed that ending a sentence with a preposition was strictly illegal, only to find out it's completely fine, what other strict grammar rules are just an illusion waiting to be broken? Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.